Good morning, and today we are talking about Dante and the English cemetery as part of our series on the Academia Bessarion, this being number 6. I had made a mistake when we recorded it with the participants. I had forgotten to turn on the registration, the recording. So we're redoing it, but sadly without the wonderful participants who were present, such as Catherine Adoyo and Alexander Johnson, Anne Babetti, and also Grover Zinn joined us after we had ended, and so on. But here we are, Dante and Florence's English Cemetery. And the English cemetery was outside of the city wall, outside of the gate of Porta Pinti, which we see here, designed by Arnolfo di Cambio, with the Florentine lily and also the fresco. This was destroyed in the 1860s, and we had hoped to place a statue of Beatrice and Dante on our wall in the empty niche. And Amalia Chadi Dupre descended from Amalia Dupre and Giovanni Dupre. Had created this bozza for us, which I like because there's Beatrice. There's no statue of her in Florence, but she is teaching Dante. She's smaller than he is, and also more brilliant. And here we have what the cemetery was like in the 19th century. And all of these tombs, except one, are still there. And this is an aerial view of the cemetery, now in the oval which Giuseppe Poggi formed it, which is like the human brain, just the way the 19th century had the British Library with its Panizzi Dome and the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, and today, unfortunately, in square glass boxes. And these are the lilies that my Roma have planted, and also the design on Elizabeth Barrett Browning's tomb by Frederick Lord Leighton. And again, the lilies. These are our Dante scholars. Adolfo Musafia, he is Jewish from Trieste in Austria. And Elena Comparetti, she also is Jewish Russian. She marries Domenico Comparetti. Varvara Kudracheva, she is Russian. Robert Davidson, he is Jewish from Gdansk. Hiram Powers, he's American and part Native American. Frances Trollope, she's English. Walter Savage Landor, he's English. Joseph Garrow, who's the son of an Indian princess and who marries a Jewess, and his daughter Theodosia is a friend of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning herself, who is part black from Jamaica and English. Here is Adolfo Musafia, and we have present in our amongst our participants Leopoldo Stefanuti, who is the descendant of Adolfo Musafia and who looks exactly like his grandfather. And here is Elena Comparetti, who married the great scholar who wrote Virgil nel Medioevo, Domenico Comparetti. Unfortunately, their marriage was not exactly a happy one, and she would leave him to go and be an educator in Venice. And then Varvara Kudracheva, and her husband will die the year after her death. He laments her death on her tomb, recalling the figure of the orphan above, not saying that she has left him widowed, but that she has left him orphaned. And then we have Robert Davidson, and I used his books to do my research on Brunetto Latino and found that every single reference he made to a document in the archives, you could retrieve a splendid scholarship which he spent a lifetime doing with love of Florence. And that is what it characterizes all of these foreigners who come to Italy, is they're drawn here by their love of Dante and of Florence. And these are some of the documents which I was able to reread because he already had. And these are pages in the Libro de Monteperti, and also the Westminster document, and also the peace treaty with Arezzo. And these are the documents here in the Vatican Secret Archives and here in Westminster Abbey. And from these, I was able to create these two books, Twice Told Tales, Dante and Brunetto and Dante, and then Il Tesoro, the edition of the Tesoretto, and two versions of the Tesoro, which are just about to be published by the Regione Toscana. And then Hiram Powers, who was this magnificent sculptor. He was discovered by Frances Trollope in Cincinnati on the American frontier, and she had him do waxworks of Dante's Commedia. And then he became professor at the Accademia de Belle Arti. And this is his Greek slave. This is the Indian maiden escaping her pursuers. And this is his statue of America. Elizabeth Barrett Browning will write an impassioned sonnet against slavery to his Greek slave statue. And here is Frances Trollope. She was the wife of an incompetent lawyer, and she had to support her family, including the son, Anthony Trollope, who, like her, will become a great writer and who will eclipse her fame. But she was writing both travel books and novels against injustice, like Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy, and Jonathan Jefferson Whitlaw against slavery in America. And this is her too, with its Latin inscription by her son, Thomas Adolphus Trollope. And there is the house in which they lived in Piazza dell'Indipendenza. Thomas Adolphus, Francis, Beachy, the child of Theodosia and Theodosia. And this is the book which we have now published with the Trollope Society. And we have Trollope Society members present at the Zoom meeting that we held, and Dennis Looney, who wrote Freedom Readers on the reception of Dante in the African American community, and who was the one who taught me about the importance of this cemetery for this topic, about Frederick Douglass visiting here, and about Francis Trollope and Hiram Powers. And then we have Walter Savage Landor, who wrote The Imaginary Conversations and who had this villa in San Domenico near Fiesole. And one of his imaginary conversations is between the adolescent uh, Beatrice and Dante in their neighborhood by the Dante house. And he was actually, though he had a very unhappy marriage, he was very much of a feminist. And in his dialogues, his imaginary conversations, he gives credence to women's intelligence and beauty. And here we have Joseph Garrow. He's the son of an Indian princess, and we have this image of him very Indian with his Anglo father, the English father who's now dead and is in the medallion portrait, and his father's sister, Eleanor, who will raise the child who has been left enough money for him to have the best education in England. And in 1846, he publishes The Early Life of Dante. It's actually the first English translation of the Vita Nova, and it's very good in a beautiful parallel text. I ordered this book from New Delhi, and it came to me by way of the coronavirus epidemic. And what amazed me was that the price, with this beautiful leather binding, was almost nothing. And then we have Elizabeth Barrett Browning buried in a tomb designed by Frederick Lord Leighton. And the Comune gave the laurel wreath and brought the gonfalone of justice to her. And she was writing in Casa Guidi Windows about the fame of Dante during the Risorgimento, where he is the architect, as it were, the founder of the Italian language, which united the peninsula of Italy, which had been separated into many kingdoms and fiefdoms and so forth, and under the papacy, and finally became in the 19th century one nation. And these are the books that I have published on her, Aurora Lee and Other Poems, which also includes Casa Guidi Windows. And then we did this lovely edition of Casa Guidi Windows in William Morris type, translated also into Italian, which had not had been done except in excerpts. And now we are going to be publishing O Bella Libertà with Le Lettere, with all of the major poetry of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, edited by Rita Severi and myself, and translated by a whole team of women and a few men. And these books in this cemetery are collected and written. Dante readings are carried out in our Cenacolo Dante Alighieri. We've now read the Commedia 3 times, all of it, with ordinary people, ordinary Florentines. If we have an English or American tourist, we require them to read at least one Terza Rima, and we have loved doing this. And we've also read the Vita Nova. We got halfway through the Vita Nova the second time when the coronavirus hit. So then we gravitated to doing these Academia Bessarion6e Zoom discussions. And we also have websites on the works of Brunetto Latino, and particularly we have Dante Vivo, where we have the text, the readings by Carlo Poli, who was the son of Contadini, who reads Dante Cantastorie. And then my son changed to MP3s, the readings on the LPs by the Società Dantesca Italiana, made 50 years ago. And they read Dante prose, whereas Carlo Poli reads him as poetry. And I've heard in the countryside, the contadini still able to recite Dante by heart in this wonderful rhythmic mode, which we know from Albert Lord and so forth is the mode in which even Homer was sung. And then we have also the Stones of Florence, which is a an app where you can go around Florence and find all of the Dante plaques. And we hope to expand that. And we also have these Academia Bessarion Zoom recorded discourses, such as the first one, which was on Dante's Vita Nova. And we can place these 19th and 20th century scholars present in our cemetery in the larger context of Dante scholarship. We know of the Tre Corone, Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio. The problem being that Petrarch is rather the Oedipal complex, and he despises Dante for writing in the vernacular. Whereas Boccaccio, who was copying out all of Terence and all of Apuleius, both African writers, in manuscripts I've read in the Laurentian Library, and he was also writing the lively Decamerone in the Tuscan dialect. And at the same time, he was also copying and lecturing and commenting on the Commedia. But Petrarch is a purist, a Renaissance elitist, rather than espousing the danger that Boccaccio does. And unfortunately, he despises Dante for writing in the vernacular. Uh, for a while, Petrarch wins the day, and Dante's fame is eclipsed. But as Italy struggles to become a nation sharing one beautiful language, the Accademia della Crusca, Dante studies flourish both among Italians and also foreigners, especially with the labours of Lord Vernon publishing the medieval commentaries on him. Next, the fascists adopt him with their toxic nationalism. But we seek to emerge from this extraneous baggage and to find the Dante of the sensual, gold leafed, imaged, and musical text, all possible now with our electronic technology, to give to the future and the future globally as well as to Italy. The living Dante, the Dante Vivo of Giovanni Papini's pedagogic project, so that school children can love his commedia and so that the entire globe can celebrate his humanity. And here I mentioned Carlo Poli and then Bessarion 2, which is on pilgrimage in Dante, Langland, and Chaucer, and this Academia Bessarion 6 on Florence's English cemeteries, Dante scholars and lovers. And this was our first Bessarion on the Vita Nova, describing the actual place that Dante is describing in it, his house. This is before the fake Dante house was built for the museum, and that door probably is the original. And I use the sense here of Shakespeare's local habitation and a name. Dante uses his autobiography, as had Augustine and Boethius. They are themselves personally present in their texts, which is considered a kind of no no. But it is the doctrine of the incarnation, the word made flesh, and the flesh made word. And this is the Torre della Castagna, where Brunetto and Dante were priors governing Florence for 2 months in a group of 12. And this is the Bargello and the Badia Fiorentina. And we can see the Badia Fiorentina painted in this landscape, cityscape of the Madonna della Misericordia to the left of the baptistry. And this is the wonderful painting, it's later, that is in the Badia of a Filipino, of St. Bernard, writing his commentary on the Song of Songs, being visited by the Virgin, whom he sees as a bride. And this is also taken from Dante. And I wanted to mention that here you have the figure of the donor, Piero della Pugliese, and you are meant to be him, to be in the painting instead of outside. This is meant to be taking place in your imagination. And the artist has presented his own wife as the Virgin and his own children as the angels. This was what Florence was doing. It was making Florence into the new Jerusalem, the new Bethlehem, the new Nazareth. And here I give the dates. Guido Cavalcanti, born in 1250, 15 years older than Dante Alighieri, born in 1265. He is married to Beatrice, Farinata's daughter, and so forth. And then Dante is baptized here in the baptistry. Not all of these mosaics would yet have been present, but this is what he sees as a baby. And then he sees Beatrice Portinari, 9 years old, in 1274. He marries Gemma Donati, 1285, at 19, but loves Beatrice. Beatrice marries Simone de' Bardi in 1287. Her father, Folco Portinari, founds Santa Maria Nuova Hospital, 1288, then dies 31st of December 1289, when Dante is 24. Beatrice dies 8th of June 1290 at 25. The loss of the Jerusalem kingdom, the fall of Acca, occurs 18th of May 1291. And I believe that Dante is seeing Beatrice as a form, as a figure of Christ, with Jerusalem becoming now Florence. And Dante, orphaned, has Brunetto Latino become his guardian in the 1280s, and he will give the sonnet to Ser Brunetto accompanying the Vita Nova 1291. It is possibly the schoolboy's, he is possibly the schoolboy scribe of the Tesoretto and Mare Amoroso, who will later write two Tesoro manuscripts before 1298. And this is this wonderful illustration by Francesco de Barberino of himself. He's also a student with Dante Alighieri and Guido Cavalcanti. And this is Dante holding open the book of the Tesoro, while Brunetto Latino is reading from the French Le Livre du Trésor into translating simultaneously, orally, into Italian to his students who are writing down this cluster of manuscripts all dated in the 1280s and 1290s. And these are the ones that I have been editing. And this is the manuscript of the Ricardian Library of the Tesoretto and the Mare Amoroso, written by a schoolboy, who later, in a more mature script, but it's the same spelling, the same strokes, and the same kind of writing as will be described by Leonardo Bruni of Dante's hand, which is cancelleresca, while the other manuscripts of this cluster are all in litera textualis. And then here we have Francesco da Barberino, Documenti d'Amore, and also Brunetto Latini, the illustrated version written by Francesco da Barberino. We can see the two figures of Cupid are the same of Amore. And this is where Brunetto is being taught by Ovid about the art and also the remedies of love. And then we have the precursor writing of Cavalcanti and Dante Alighieri's Dolce Stil Nuovo, mentioned Bonagiunta da Luca, mentioned in the Commedia, and where we have Dante with the Donne Cavetti Intelletta d'Amore sung by him. And what I've done here, if you click on the arrow in the Dante Vivo, you will hear it being sung. Cantastoria, we found music that matched it. And then we have this wonderful poem written by Dante, Guido. I wish that Lapo, thou and I, could be by spells conveyed, as it were now upon a ship with all the winds, and so forth. And I found this in a Tesoro manuscript in Ferrara on the end leaves, and also with the account of pilgrimages to Jerusalem. And this is a beautiful translation by Dante Gabriel Rossetti of that sonnet. And then this one is the sonnet that Dante gave to Brunetto, presenting to him the Vita Nova, again in Dante Gabriel Rossetti's brilliant translation. And this is Dante Gabriel Rossetti's painting of Dante painting angels visited by Beatrice's brother the year after Beatrice's death. And this painting is in the Ashmolean Museum. Dante Gabriel Rossetti is the son of an exile who also commented on the Commedia, and who was an atheist and Freemason, and they are connected, the Pre-Raphaelites, with the Browning Circle. And the father is Pasquale Giuseppe Rossetti, and then the children, his children, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Cristina Rossetti, William Michael Rossetti, and Maria Francesca Rossetti. She becomes a nun And I used to stay in the convent where she lived in London on Margaret Street. It's absolutely beautiful with real candles in the choir stalls for the nuns. And she does a most beautiful Anglican commentary on Dante's Commedia. And then other members of the circle are William Holman Hunt, who sculpts his wife's tomb beside that of Elizabeth Barrett Browning here, and figures like William Morris and Edward Burne Jones. While on the fringes are John Ruskin, and I'm a member of John Ruskin's Companions of the Guild of St. George, and Frederick Lord Leighton, who's the academician who does this wonderful painting, Flaming Junes, and who designs Elizabeth's tomb. And this is the drawing Dante Gabriel Rossetti did of Alfred Lord Tennyson reading Maud in the presence of Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning when they were visiting London. And I also wanted to talk about the women scholars of Dante. Christine de Pizan in the Renaissance, she was an Italian brought at 4 years old from the Venetian area, Pisano, to Paris because her father was chosen to be the king's astrologer. And she was given the run of the king's library and was reading all of the classics in Latin and Boccaccio and Brunetto and Dante in Italian. And she writes when she's left widowed with a family to support her mother and her children. She writes Le Chemin de Longitude, where she is like Dante in blue, and the Sibyl like Virgil in red. And remember that the Sibyl was Aeneas's guide in Virgil. And it's a wonderful feminist retelling and education for the peace of Europe because she's blending together Brunetto Latino's teaching on buon governo, and also she's using Dante. And then Francis Trollope, who does the waxworks of Dante's Commedia to teach people at the American frontier culture. And Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who writes very movingly about Dante in Casa Guidi Windows, and also uses that falling leaf simile about Vallombrosa, which she takes from Milton and from Dante and from Virgil and from Homer, because artists, poets dialogue through time, just the way Walter Savage Landor spoke about imaginary conversations. And there's this resonance that carries on, and women also participate in that. And then we have Maria Francesca Rossetti doing her commentary. We have Dorothy Sayre's brilliant translation and notes, and Barbara Reynolds finishing that at her death at the same point at which Dante's final cantos had been lost and then were discovered by Pietro Alighieri, his son. And then we also have Anna Maria Chiavacci Leonardi, who did brilliant work on commenting on the Commedia, Teodolinda Barolini. And then I loved Sonia Minutelli coming to me from the Veneto region to study Brunetto, and she was discovering absolutely important aspects which taught me how to find the manuscripts of Brunetto Latino's schoolroom, where were present Guido Cavalcanti, Dante Alighieri, and Francesco da Barberino, because she was working with their astronomy, finding that in the Tesoro version, Brunetto switches from the Alfraganus he'd acquired in Spain, which he used Le Livre du Trésor, and instead is using Gershwin de Metz and teaching that. And then we also have Catherine Adoyo, who was actually present in this Zoom discussion. She's from Kenya. She writes brilliantly on Dante's music, and she's also created a novel, Rain, which is multicultural. It's about Kenya, it's about Europe, it's about America. And we had discussions of this on Zoom that went on for a long time, and we absolutely loved relating the novel to Dante. And then These are the books that I have written. O Bella Libertà, Christine de Pizan. We've translated her French back into her Italian, which hadn't been done before, so that Italians would get to know of this feminist commedia from the Renaissance, which is splendid. And then my book on pilgrimage got translated into Italian as Il Pellegrino e il Libro, and then the edition of the Tesoro for the Regione. This is the Elizabeth Barrett Browning edition, The Pilgrim and the Book study, and the Twice Told Tales on Brunetto Latino. And we've also done this project of the Musica della Commedia with Federico Badazzi and Marco Di Mano, where we took every reference to music in the Commedia and performed it from the manuscripts of the period. And that is available on YouTube and with the playlist. And we performed it in O San Michele, Cologne, Graz, Avila, San Francesco Ravenna, and in the Duomo in Florence. And the music is beautiful. And I'm hoping that the young people will find this, because actually Dante and his circle in the Dolce Stil Nuovo, they were sort of like the Beatles. And if the young people could realize that these are the games that musicians can play here and now, as they have done then, instead of being stuffy and academic and pedantic. And then also we have created the Libro de Chiodo in facsimile after studying it in the archives and with the handwriting. This is where Dante is condemned 3 times to exile and then to death. And this is my Roma Restorer with Alberto Casciani, who is teaching him. And here he is, Daniel Claudio Dumitrescu, with my bookbinding professor, teacher, Enrico Giannini, who did the leather. It was Daniel who did the metal, exactly as it is. And also, Daniel was invited to participate in restoring Donatello's pulpit in Prato. And these are people who are at the very bottom in extreme poverty in Europe, facing the greatest discrimination. They were slaves for hundreds of years, longer than were blacks, and then were in the Holocaust. This is Zoita. She's the mother. She's homeless. She's Roma, illiterate. And she's looking at a children's illustrator, Dante, and she's saying, Che bello. Dante writes for women and children who do not have Latin, who do not have education. He writes for everyone. And then these are her children who did go to school, Ferdinando and Esmeralda. And Esmeralda came one day to my computer screen where I was working on Brunetta Latina. She read perfectly in the medieval Italian, Brunetto translating Aristotle on justice. And then unjustly, the commune said that these beggars in the streets had to leave, and they went to France and then to Spain. And I'm hoping that Esmeralda will be able to continue her education. She was reading that in her third language at 10 years old. And here she is with 2 New York University students who were visiting us. And this is our presentation on how we have sought to enhance the study of Dante in Florence and globally, and creating a network, creating publications, creating performances, uh, creating Dante Vivo. And thank you for being present. And my apologies for the mix up I made with the real presentation with the wonderful participants that we had. Right. Now we can go to, I never know how completely how to click to share. Um, and right, let's see if we can. Okay, that's to that's and I'm still trying to figure out how to get out of this. And welcome and thank you. And right, so we've finished the that, and now we need to go to Termina. And good morning, everyone.